Hello and welcome to the 69th episode of From Impossible to Inevitable. I am your host, Megan Bauer. Thank you so much for pushing play on today's episode. Today, I want to share with you a quote that Jake shared with me recently. He had seen it on LinkedIn, and it struck up a really good conversation between the two of us. And the quote is, "Assume that I can, and maybe I will." Now, the context of this quote was coming from kids with disabilities who are told that they can't read, or they can't hold a job, or they can't do this or that, and they can't, live a normal life, or whatever it is. They're told that they can't do these things because of their disability. And because they're told that they can't, they don't. And the perspective shift is, assume that I can. Especially when you're talking about kids with disabilities, assume that they can, and maybe they'll struggle. Maybe it'll be harder for them. Yes, totally. I'm not getting into they can do more than they let off. That's not what I'm saying. That's totally not where I'm going. Where I'm going is, if you can make an assumption, even within yourself, that they can, maybe they will. Maybe they will be able to. Maybe it'll be harder. Maybe they'll do it differently than what you expect. Maybe you'll actually figure out their true limits instead of falling to whatever limits are being placed upon them. So as Jake and I were talking about this, we were talking about ourselves and our girls. And we have always encouraged their independence. We have very independent girls. They love to do things by themselves, on their own, as much as possible. And a lot of times it slows things down. It takes longer. It causes some frustration. There are negative side effects to their independence. And when they accomplish things, they have so much more confidence in themselves because they tried, they struggled, they tried some more, they got frustrated, they calmed down, they tried, they succeeded, and all of a sudden they can do it. And so our girls being extremely independent, we've always really fostered that. We've always really encouraged them, try it, and I'm here to help you. Try it and let me know if you need help. Like, you are not alone, and I want you to give it a try. And I've mentioned before that one of the phrases that you hear all the time in our house is practice makes better. And we are very sure to say practice makes better when they're trying things, when they're actively trying and struggling, and when they've succeeded. We say, look, all of your practice made you, and we pause. And sometimes they'll oblige us by saying better. Sometimes they'll grumble it, better. And sometimes they won't say anything, but I know they're saying it in their head, so it's still a win. We drill this into them that their practice is making them better. And our oldest is in gymnastics, and so it's very easy for her to see that the more she practices, the more time she puts in, the more repetitions, the more efforts, the more falls even that she makes, the better she gets. And same with our youngest. As she tries new things, she's only 4, so there is a world of things for her to try, and she goes after it. And sometimes it freaks us out a little bit. Sometimes it's like, just let me buckle your car seat because I can do it so much faster, and we'll just get going. And we have to remind ourselves to just, it's okay, slow down, slow down. It's going to take her 30 seconds longer than it would us. And that's going to be okay, because at some point, she's going to be able to do it all by herself. And so we try to assume that our girls can, and maybe they will, and maybe they won't. And that's okay too. As our youngest is learning how to buckle her own car seat, she gets frustrated a lot, because if it's not at the right angle, it's not going in. And she's honestly at a different perspective than an adult, pushing in the buckle. And so it's a harder angle for her, and it's not an easy, buckle to buckle in. Like, there are difficulties that her being 4 and 30 pounds presents. But she can do it. She can, if she's calm enough to do it. And so when we assume that she can, I'll hop in the car, I'll hop in the front seat, and I'll be like, let me know if you need help. I won't start the car because that adds pressure. Like, mom's about to go, I gotta get buckled. I won't start the car. I'll just hop in and I will assume that she can do it. And sometimes she does. Sometimes I have to hop out and finish it up. Sometimes I have to turn around and finish it up. And that's okay. And that's okay. So, yes, we focused the most of this conversation on my kids and parenting and assuming that others can and maybe they will. And I want to take this into, introspectively and think about yourself. What do you tell yourself that you can't do because of whatever? Maybe you have a reason, maybe you don't. It doesn't really matter. There are assumptions that you make about yourself that you say, I can't, whatever it is. And what if you decided to change that and assume instead that you can? What if I chose, so I did make this choice actually. I've shared previously, there are not a lot of green things living in my house. Not a lot of plants. I tend to kill them. We purchased one. It's probably been alive for about a month. It's not a very high maintenance one. It's one of these like snake plants or whatever you call it. But look, it's mostly green. If you're listening on the podcast, I apologize. You can't see my green plant, but those of you joining me on YouTube sure get to see my green plant. So anyways, I made an assumption that I could keep something green and alive. And so far, it's been working out. And along with that assumption, I decided that I could learn to keep it alive and that I was capable. I assumed that I could do it at some point in the future, keep something green and alive. And I think maybe it's been, I don't know, 5, 6 months maybe that I've had this green plant. So it's doing pretty good. I mean, it's still green mostly. There are a couple of leaves on this side that you didn't get to see that are a little brown. It's fine. So I made that assumption about myself. Like, okay, I have a track record of killing plants. Yes, that is all true. And I can learn and I can change and I can keep a plant alive. I'm making this assumption and I'm acting on that assumption, or I acted on it. And it's doing good. So what are some other things that I can assume in my own favor? What are some other things that I can assume that I can do, that I can learn how to do, that I can grow into doing? What are some other things that I can evolve into? And make an assumption that I can do this. Maybe it'll be hard. Maybe it'll be a struggle. Maybe I'll do it messier than somebody else. And that's okay, because it's a progression. I'm making an assumption that I can, and then maybe I will. That's the other part of it. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but maybe I will. And if you assume that you can't, you're not gonna ever, because that's how that works. If you assume that somebody else can't, they can push past that and decide that they can. But if you go back to kids, that stunts growth a lot by telling kids that they can't do something as far as abilities, not as far as safety concerns, as in you cannot run in the street. Not talking about that. What I am talking about is you. If you tell yourself that you cannot do something, if you tell yourself that you cannot learn something, that you cannot change something, then you just won't. You won't. Nobody else's desire for you or knowledge that you can do it will ever override your own beliefs and assumptions about yourself. Never. that their ideas of you will never override your own idea of your abilities and capabilities. You have to decide that for yourself. You have to assume that you can. You have to assume that you are capable of learning and growing and being that person or doing that thing or accomplishing that thing. You have to. It's not optional. And there are things that everybody has things that they already decided that they can't do. That maybe they don't want to, and that's fine. You don't have to want to do everything. I mean, you don't have to want to, learn everything and grow every way. You're not supposed to. But there are things that are dear to our hearts that we truly want for ourselves and for our lives. And we consistently, maybe subconsciously, decide that we can't. We assume that we can't. And so we don't even try. But you can change that. You can decide today, you can assume today that you can achieve that, that you can become that you can do that. And maybe you will. And maybe you will. Isn't that the beautiful thing? So I love how this quote that Jake brought to me just has such a range. It has such a range with how we deal with other people and encouraging them and loving them. And of course, we won't ever be able to change their beliefs or assumptions about themselves, but we can encourage that change. We can encourage that belief, encourage that positive assumption. If we have enough, we might be able to help them make that change. And we can certainly make that change within ourselves. We can certainly assume that we can, especially when it's something that we want. And maybe it's something as silly as, I'm trying to keep a green thing alive in my house. That's, in the long run, that's silly. If this thing dies, then okay, whatever. It's gonna be fine. But there are things in my life that would mean everything if I were to accomplish them. They'd mean everything if I were to make that goal a reality. And as long as I continually assume that I can, I will make choices and changes in favor of that assumption that will lead me down that path to get there. And maybe I will. Maybe I will. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Thank you again for joining me. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Until next time, bye for now.